Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Athlete Podcast brought to you by Sports for Champions. Today we're joined by Katie Head, hammer thrower. How are you doing, Katie?
I'm good, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for coming in. We spoke a little bit before the podcast started, and obviously you've got quite an interesting sort of background of how you got into sport and things. Obviously, Dad competed at a really high level as well. Talk to us a little bit about how you managed to get into hammer throwing.
I always started out as a sporty child. My parents were always like, you're going to learn to swim. If you want to dance, you want to dance. My brother played badminton. We both played a bit of rugby. We both swam competitively. And then it just kind of like, my dad then, after he retired in 2002 from competitive throwing, went into coaching. And so sometimes it was, one of us has got to come down and sit by the side of the circle in whatever weather in a little tent whilst these coaching athletes, because brothers at a swimming comp or vice versa. So then you've just always been around it and then gone, yeah, I fancy a bit of that. I fancy swinging that around my head and having a go.
Yeah, so obviously your dad competed in, was it 2 Commonwealth Games? And then...
It might have been 3.
3, yeah.
3, I think it was 3.
And an Olympic Games as well in 1992. So obviously your dad competed at a really high level. Is that drive to be one of the best, does that come from your dad, do you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I think none of us in our family are opposed to hard work, and we'll always work hard at anything. And then there's always that goal that you've got to beat Dad. I'm like, I've got to beat Dad. I've got to be number one in the family. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you said before, you can't be number one in the world till you're number one in your family. So in school, because obviously you're now going to be going to schools with Sports for Champions. Did you enjoy school? How was your school experience?
I think it was varied. I think secondary school was definitely different because back then I was throwing and competing and starting to do well. As a youngster, at 16 I had 4 British records. So I had the under 13 age group, under 15 age group, under 17 age group, and then the age 16 best with a weight throw. So I had all of them. So there was some teasing, that's for sure, especially more so from boys and girls. It was, oh, you're a man, oh, you're a beast. And you do have it sometimes where you're like, oh, really? Sort of thing. And you go in, but other times when I've been this tall, I'm almost 6 foot tall at the age of 14. They're normally just intimidated. And half the time I just kind of going, okay, you're just jealous because a girl's stronger than you. Or if they go, you're a man, and I just keep going, but why? But why? And then suddenly they had no reason why. I was like, since when does being a hammer thrower make me a man?
Exactly. Did you find going through school, there was obviously, because you were competing at a really good level, especially in secondary school, did you find that there was a lot of sort of sacrifices that you were having to make, whereas that'd be socially or... Yeah.
I didn't go to my school prom. I never went to my school... Oh no, I ended up going to my school prom because I thought I would get selected for a World Youth Championships, and I didn't. So I almost didn't go to prom. I literally got a dress a week before and was like, if I get a dress, I'm going. But other than that, I didn't go. I never really went to parties because I either was training on the next morning or I was competing in wherever. And when I threw my British record, I was meant to go on a week-long trip with the school canoeing down the Ardèche River, and then suddenly went, oh, now I've got the opportunity to go and compete for England for the first time. And then went, and my school was very supportive in the sport and was always like, yeah, go. Yes, this is a school trip and yes, you paid for it, but if this is competing for England, this is something that you don't normally get at 15 or 16 years old, go. And they were always very supportive with it at school. But yeah, there was a lot of sacrifices. I didn't think I went to an actual school party probably until I was 18 maybe, because I was always, no, I've got training, or I'm too tired from training, or whatever. So it was different, but I've always been called an old soul, and that stuff hasn't always been a priority for me. It's never been, oh, I want to go out to this party with this people. I'm not going to remember one random party when I'm 70 years old. I'm going to remember the fact that I've worked hard and I've got to this championships or I've won this medal.
Yeah. So speak to us a little bit about, you mentioned that about the first time you represented England. How'd that feel? Was a sense of pride there, and speak to us that first sort of when you found out you were going to be representing your country for the first time.
Yeah, it was a bit mad because you do it by English schools and then you get to schools international. So it's like, okay, I compete, I've won, I've got my medal. And now it's like, oh, would you come with us? You've now got to go and fill out your forms and try on a bunch of England kit. You're like, oh my God. And you're sitting there going, oh my God. And my first time, I actually went up to Scotland. It was my first time, it was in Grangemouth. So then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're all there in England kit. Oh, you're all there. It's all a bit like, oh, and then suddenly Dad's like, well, when I did my school's international and saying this, he was like, you'll go through this. And then you get that other side of it as well. The same with Great Britain. I think my first time as a Great Britain was a GB Junior for the Loughborough International. And then I did World Juniors. And World Juniors was definitely, I think, not so much England, because every time I competed for England as a youngster, it was within the home nations. So it didn't feel like as big a step up, but definitely when I started to compete GB and then done the World Juniors, it was like, oh wow,
that was the big one.
Yeah,
that was
the big one. Like, okay, we're halfway up the ladder, sort of thing.
So how, you said obviously it feels different. What sort of changes are there between England and GB? Is there a big difference for you, or?
I think there's a bit of like I think the level of competition's different as a Great Britain. But I also think it might be harder, and you've got a lot more. I always put a lot more expectation on myself when I'm competing for Great Britain and out there, because I'm not just representing me. But I also think that it's so hard now to get on a Great Britain team that no matter at what level you're on a Great Britain team, it's got to be celebrated.
Absolutely. So in terms of your training, so talk us through, obviously I know you just started back now, haven't you, after the off season?
Yep.
So talk to us a little bit about what's your usual, say pre-season, what's your usual week looking like?
So I normally do like a 4 to 6 week blocks and then an easy week. But I do try and train twice a day, almost every day when I can. So it's normally about 3 lifting sessions in the gym a week. So it's all Olympic weights, conditioning, some fitness. The morning sessions are normally like a fitness, like a general conditioning circuits. And then I'll throw 4 to 5 times a week. But so during the summer, my throws will probably be between 12 and 20. And then during the winter, we'll really ramp up the numbers. So I'm getting close to 30 throws a session. And then we incorporate a bit of everything. So I used to swim when I was young. So once or twice a week, my morning sessions are I go and swim. But I always plan it, the swim session, so I'm not just plodding up and down. I was never that swimmer. I was always a power and a sprinter when it came to swimming. I wouldn't say I was the best at swimming, but I was a powerful swimmer. So we always do it. So even when I'm swimming, it's still power based. Yeah. It's still sprints based. It's still speed and power. But it is a lot of 2 sessions a day, hopefully with a nap in between if I can. And then it is a lot. We normally change weights or hammers, so we'll do a lot more heavy strength stuff whilst we're doing technical stuff. Normally at the start of the winter, we'll try and throw a bit left-handed to keep us a bit balanced and just have that basic.
Why would you throw left-handed during training?
So normally we do it as like a balancing, because a balancing and just it gets your brain working in a different way and thinking about stuff in a different way and getting different feelings. Because if you're having 30 throws a session and you're swinging and it's all coming from your right side, it's like, what's your left side doing?
Yeah, sort of autopilot,
yeah. So you always try and balance it out, so you're not just so dominant.
Absolutely. So again, we spoke a little bit about your dad at the start. So your dad's actually your coach as well, which for like elite athletes like yourselves, it's sort of a tough predicament to be in, because sometimes it works really well, but you've also seen there's some stories where it hasn't worked well. How are you sort of striking the balance between dad and coach?
I think obviously youngster, it was always like a bit more what dad says goes. Dad's coach, dad knows everything. And now as I've got older, we have all come as a collaborative effort. So my brother as well is in that as well. So it's not just dad says this, I'm like, or it's always, do you understand what I'm saying, or something like this, or I'll go, I don't like this, or I'm not getting along with this. And my brother is quite involved in my strength and conditioning as well. So it's all very collaborative between everyone in our family. So sometimes I'm throwing and Dad and Thomas stood there going, what do you think of that? Oh, I like this part. And I'm like, and I go, I like this part. So it has become a lot more collaborative, and I think that has worked a lot better, with it being like, it's not just all on me to throw well or me to follow instructions or anything like that. It's we change it as it goes, as this thing needs to change, or I'm not liking this bit, or I'm not feeling as stable in this part. And then it's all very more collaborative now than it ever, I think it ever has been.
So do you find that's helped you personally as well when it comes to, say, if you were watching someone else throw, say speaking to your dad as you were putting tips in, does that help you when you feel like you're competing as well, because you're sort of seeing coaching tips and trying to sort of stay on top of them yourself?
I think so. I think now I've become a lot more, especially because I've been doing a lot more comps around Europe, I've had to figure things out a lot more for myself. Like, hammer throwing's not the ludicrous sport around there, so it's not like I can go to a comp and have, I'll have my psychologist there, I'll have my dad there, I'll have my physio there. It's, I go to the middle of nowhere in Germany or Czech, and suddenly it's like, now I'm throwing. So it's all, you've all just got to figure it out by yourself. So it's that development and understanding on yourself as well now, where it's like, okay, I can go to these comps and I can figure it out by myself. If I'm in a hole and I need to get out of, then I can figure it out myself with my own feelings and my own reactions. Yeah.
So obviously you're nowhere near your peak even now. You've still got years to go. When we're speaking, LA 2028, that's your sort of first goal. What are the stepping stones going to be to reach that goal and hopefully medaling in 2028?
I think next year's World Champs is going to be a good target, and plans. We already have plans in mind of how we're going to structure a season and start it later for a World Champs, which is in Tokyo in September. And then hopefully a Commonwealth Games is in the year afterwards, which hopefully I'll get a bit of redemption in that. So hopefully, I haven't had a major senior championships. So all the stepping stones towards Paris is getting experience at major championships and succeeding at major championships, to then the Olympics isn't a far cry from what I've done. It's that constant sort of like building up the ladder to then get to the climax that is the Olympics sort of thing. Yeah.
So in terms of like, obviously you speak about we know what your end goal is. Your end goal is Olympic gold. Are you, when it comes to setting goals, do you prefer long-term goals and you just look at LA and you go, right, that's it, and I'll work towards it, or are you a bit more short-term goals and you say, right, like you said, first thing I want to do, senior competition, senior major competition? Are you more sort of short-term goals?
I think definitely more short-term. It's always been like, okay, so what do I want to do next season? But then you do have in the back of the mind the whole grand scheme of things for the next 4-year and Olympic cycle, but you're always like, no. I think you've got to have the smaller short-term goals to keep you going. You're like, okay, we've got this one. Yep, that one's on to the next one, on to the next one, sort of thing.
Yeah. So obviously we were speaking before, and you mentioned this past season just gone, you didn't have your best season. How's that been sort of? I know a lot of athletes, even just people in day-to-day lives, if they're in work and they're struggling, it can take a toll on them. How has that been for you? Obviously, not coming off the best season.
I mean, it's been frustrating, it's been emotional, but I think I've always had such a higher expectation of myself, especially since I threw my PB in 2022, and then we had a year, 18 months where my confidence, I went from such a high with my PB to then such a low. So I think we're still building that up, and 2023 was good at building that up, and this year there's still lots of learning happening, and my expectations were different. So yes, we've dealt through some stuff in the last couple of seasons, and maybe towards the end of that. But I think it's that little process goals. It's like, okay, I've gone to a comp in Europe and I've come back with a second. Yeah. Or I've one of the comps that I really wanted to do this year was a competition in Germany where it's like the comp for throwing. Yeah. And I was like, I had never competed there. I want to compete there. Yes, I didn't have my best day, but I was like, I competed in the same competition as a world record holder at like 24, and I was like, I'm following the world record holder in the circle, and I'm a bit like, a little bit shell-shocked, but then that's a learning experience in itself. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose that comes back to what, like you were saying before, about wanting to compete in that first, senior international competition, and it is sort of, you don't want to be going into, say an Olympics, you don't want to be going in there for the first time, do you? There's that saying, like you've been here before.
Yeah.
So we've spoken to now a few, especially throwing athletes, where they've all mentioned about confidence and they were low on confidence, and then that affects their performance, which affects their confidence, and it's like a vicious cycle. Why do you feel like confidence, especially, is so important, especially in like throwing events?
I think as well with throwing events, you either got to go for it or you're not. You can't get away with a throw unless you've gone. You can't do a throw half-heartedly.
Yeah, you've got to go all in.
You've got to go all in for it. And I think throwers. I think I think a lot of athletes start here, and the throwers start a bit further down. We've got more of a steeper climb than some, I'd say. So then sometimes it's like when you've already climbed so far, and then one thing knocks you down. It feels so much bigger because you've already come so far, and then it's another thing knocks you down. Yeah. I think it's that. I think that's the confidence thing, and it's so like throwing can be. Yes, it's not subjected in the fact that you throw the furthest, you win.
Yeah.
But you could turn up to a comp and the circle is absolutely diabolical, and it's like you can't turn. Yeah. Or you can turn up to a circle where it's like, this circle's like glass, I can barely stand up. Like, you don't know what you're going to have. So, like, and when you see your stats, and it's like, you can have a throw at 69 and you can have a throw at 60, and you're like, but yeah, it's all in perspective, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you're now, obviously, we've had a few throwers in, and every time we always ask a question before we come on, would you rather medal or beat your PB? And every single one without fail, they've all said beat your PB. You said it as well. I think that's so different compared to a lot of other sports. Like, for example, I play a team sport, and if you said, score a goal and not win the game, or win the game, you'd always say win the game. Whereas with the individual sports, you seem to always, like, that first competition's always with yourself. Have you always found that? Have you always found it has been trying to beat your PB first, and then everyone else, I'll get to them once I've beat myself?
Well, I think it's also part of, you've got to focus on yourself. You can't control what other people do. So if you say, I want to go for a medal, you're like, yeah, okay, but a medal to you could be 75 metres, and you're like in a medal, but someone else goes and throws 78.
Yeah.
You can't control what other people do to get a medal. You can't control that, but you can control you, and you can go, I'm going out and I'm going to throw far. I'm going out and I'm going to get PB. If that happens to be a gold, a silver, a bronze, okay. I've had experience where I've won, but I haven't had a PB, and I've been annoyed to high heaven because I know and I expect more out of myself. And every chance I get to throw and every chance I get to compete is a chance to beat my previous self. So I've always thought like that, even from starting out.
Do you find, I think that's sort of the difference between like elite level athletes though, isn't it? Where your standards are so high that, you've won an event there, but because you threw, was it 4 meters under your PB, you weren't happy.
Yeah.
Whereas some people would say like, brilliant, I've won a medal.
Yeah.
I didn't have the best day at the office, but I think do you find that do you try and keep your standards really high?
I always think I've had high standards, and I don't know whether I've always worked hard, so I always think I should get them in a way, but you never know. But I've always had high standards. If I'm going to do anything, I'm not one to do it half-heartedly, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities.
Absolutely. Okay, so if you were, for example, you went into one of our schools doing an event, and for example, a little girl comes up to you and says, "Listen, you really inspired me. I really want to get into hammer throwing." What would you say to them?
Do it.
Just do it.
Do it.
Just go for it.
Do it. I mean, who else can say, I get to spin around in a circle and throw a heavy thing a bloody long way?
That's a good point.
And then people go, and then it's also not many people know it, so you're getting the sport out there.
Yeah. So what do you think, what would be those initial steps? Is it that you just find a club and go down, or what would you advise?
I would say find a club and go down, but I would also say, I'm part of the Ham Circle Association. So we use that, and you can always go and contact them on their website or on, I think, their Facebook group. And you can go, I'm based here, or like their parent does it or something like that, and go, I'm based here, my daughter really wants to try this, is there anywhere around? And they can point you in a direction where there's a well-respected coach within the club, because not all athletics clubs have the facilities of a hammer cage. Some places do, but football takes over, so you can't always use the throwing field because football's there. So sometimes it's like that. You've got to find spaces that are available. It's not just about finding a coach, it's about finding a place where you can actually be able to compete and throw.
Practice. Do you find that happens a lot, where it's like hammer throws sort of giving the backseat to other sports? Because obviously you mentioned there, when football's on, it's like, right, close the cage down, football's on. So is that frustrating? Is that like, when you're competing at a high level?
Extremely. Yeah. I'm never one that's like, if someone goes, oh, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a hammer thrower.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never one to say what I've achieved or anything like that. Even the last week, my brother, who's 28 and still throws, British champs finalist, top 8, still was like, oh, is throwing cage available to use? No, not unless you've got a coach. But I'm 28. I've been throwing 15 years. I'm a coach myself. No, you're not allowed unless you've got a coach. And then he went, well, I'm an international athlete, or you're not promoting people to take part in the sport when you make it, they jump through hoops. Yes, under 18s always have a coach there, but he's 28, he's a coach himself. He's been around this sport since we were born. He was 4 or 5 years old at Manchester 2002 Commonwealths. I was 2 years old. We've been around the sport, we know we're safe enough, but there is so much backseats and so much hurdles, I think, to go through. Because
there's obviously there's an argument, isn't there, like they're just increasing barriers to compete and practice. Because I think it's all well and good saying, you come down, once a week, twice a week, do your training session. But you look at other sports, you look at football, look how many football pitches there are. You look at, even basketball now, there's loads of publicly available basketball courts. It's sort of just increasing that barrier, isn't it? Of every time, you've got to try and, have a coach with you, like I said, if under 18, obviously. But you guys are experienced, really high level athletes. If you want to go down and train, you should be able to train. There's nobody available. Okay, so we're gonna move into just a couple of final questions. So you've obviously travelled quite a few, quite a few different countries. Where's been the favourite place you've been so far?
Ooh. Finland as a beautiful place. Finland was probably one of the most beautiful places I'd been. I was lucky enough that this year I did a competition in Prague and then a couple of days later in Germany. So we did a bus journey, which, I'm not gonna lie, wasn't the worst. It was like 4.5 hours on a bus. It was comfy. We slept, sort of thing. It wasn't the worst, but I think I've been to quite a few, and I think as a country, I'd say Finland's probably the prettiest. And then I think Paris might have been. From a point of view of where I've thrown well, if Prague this year was probably my favourite. Prague this year was my season's best. Went in second from last, finished second. So I was like, thank you, I'll be back here again. If you take me back, I'll be happily to be here next year.
So final one about nutrition. Because obviously, when we've spoken to throwers before, they've said nutrition isn't as important because they're not on sort of strict diets, and it is basically you're eating to fuel your body. What's a sort of typical day nutrition-wise look like for you?
I mean, I agree with most of them to an extent. I just know myself. Like, when I feel good in myself, I feel like it reflects in my training, it reflects in my throwing. So I've changed what I've had previously, so that it's now just like generally it's higher protein stuff. Generally, so like a normal, I do have a sweet tooth, so that's my downfall. But it's normally a yogurt granola type for breakfast, something like that, high protein yogurt, something like that, fruit or porridge or something like that. And then lunch is probably near a meal prep type thing. It's a leftover chicken paella, it's a leftover pasta bake, or if I don't have leftovers, it's sometimes scrambled eggs on toast and stuff like that. So the protein content's always there, I'd say. I like my protein shakes, and sometimes I like them too much because I'm like, oh, chocolate, it just tastes like chocolate milk. Pretend it's chocolate milk when it's a protein shake.
So what's your favourite cheat meal? You mentioned then that you have a sweet tooth. So what's your favourite cheat meal?
Oh, there's too many. I do like, as much as I'm good, we do have a Friday night takeaway night, no matter what in the family.
What's the go-to takeaway?
It revolves probably two. It's an Indian or a Chinese. And I used to be a really fussy eater, and I was like nothing from there. Like I used to say from the Chinese, can I have the red chicken? Like that's how fussy I was. Like when we used to go away, I'd be like, can I have plain pasta and plain chicken? But my parents made me, every time we went away or we went somewhere, I had to try something different. So now I've just got really expensive tastes. So now I'll be like, oh, I have the mixed seafood thing, thank you. I'll have the crab, I'll have the lobster.
Yeah, they should have left you picky.
They should have left me fussy, just like chicken and bacon pasta, plain.
Done.
Yeah.
So what's the best bit of advice that you've received? That could be, whether that be, from a coach, friend, family member, could be, in your sport, could be, personally.
I think it's just something that I've learned. Yeah. It's like, no matter what, keep going.
Yeah.
Always keep going.
Persevere.
Yes, you can be knocked down, but you can always get back up, whether it's, oh, you're a women's hammer thrower. What the hell's that? Oh, that's scary. I'm like, okay, you can think it's scary. I'm still going to throw.
Yeah.
I'm still going to throw and I'm still going to succeed. Or it's, oh, we don't think you're good enough. Okay, let me prove you wrong. Yeah. Yeah, it is one of them ones where it's like, no matter what, you've just got to keep going.
Just keep doing it. I think that's really it's a really good sort of message, especially for like the younger generation as well, as just keep on going, carry on, and
nothing's guaranteed. You've still got to keep going and keep earning it.
Yeah. So final question we've got is, okay, so we don't know when you're going to retire. It's a long way away, but when you retire and you finally finish, probably take your Olympic gold medal off. What's something you want to look back and say, yeah, I achieved that? Forget everything else, but is there one thing that you go, that's the one thing I want to make sure I've definitely done?
I think I got a taste for British records when I was younger, so I'm like, well, I still need the senior one. So I think there's that one. Whether it stays for a year, days, or whatever, you can say I've held the senior British record. I think that's one of them.
Yeah, to go along with all the ones.
You're right. No one can take away finalists in a global.
Yeah.
But I think to be up there within your own nation and be in a history books up there. Like I remember when I did my PB and I went second at the time. Obviously, our sport's progressed now. That I've now gone down a little bit, but our mum was like, "Oh, you've now got second on the all-time list," and I was like, "Stop!" I was like, "I can't take it." I was like, "I'm all a bit overwhelmed. Stop! My stomach feels funny and all of this."
I think that's great place to end. So thank you for coming in, Katie. Really appreciate it. Obviously, we're going to be taking a keen eye on the rest of your career. Good luck this year. I'm sure you'll smash it, and then obviously, well, fingers crossed, we'll see you in some major championships coming up. So that's the latest episode of the Athlete Podcast, guys. We'll see you all next time.